Now, a lot of people keep asking me what I think about all these rumors coming out about how, behind the scenes, the Rise of Skywalker is supposedly a complete disaster, and they're essentially trying to piece together a semblance of a decent film at the last minute out of what they have. That the initial test screenings from a few months back now were so bad that people were walking out of the theater, and Bob Iger, who is the CEO of Disney, was so upset that he immediately ordered extensive reshoots, and that they really haven't been able to figure out what to do with the movie since. And before I go on here, let me just warn you that there are, I guess, potentially spoilers for Episode 9 in this video, because I will be talking about what some of these leaks claim the movie will be or used to be. Also, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible here. I'm going to look at this from all angles and be as objective as I can. This is not going to be a video where I assume the worst, rather I'm going to assume at this point anything is possible in regards to what's going on with this movie, good or bad. Okay, so let's start out by talking a little bit about this rumored test screening that people apparently walked out of, or tried to walk out of, but they were forced to sit back down or they wouldn't get their promised gift cards. And a full description of it can be found on the site Bounding Into Comics, or you can watch the full video from Doomcock, both of which I'll try to remember to put in the description below, and if I don't, by all means, yell at me in the comments. Anyway, to be completely honest with you, what was supposedly shown in this test screening sounds so bad that it feels like someone wrote the worst possible story imaginable that was still somewhat plausible. In other words, if you were trying to write a version of Episode 9 that was both horrible and would anger a lot of fans, it was still believable enough to be real perhaps, or wasn't an overtly obvious attempt to be bad, something like this is probably what you'd come up with. I mean, at one point, supposedly, and I'll be saying that word a lot, Palpatine tells a stormtrooper to execute Order 67. And I mean, wow, that's just so bad that I honestly can't see J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, the writers of this movie, sitting down and writing that and thinking to themselves or saying to each other, yeah, that's the good stuff right there. This movie is going to be amazing. Because that's something you would do to flat out mock or irritate fans. It's certainly not fan service or some type of homage to the prequels. And if this is true, and if this is how they're going to incorporate the prequels into this movie, then I'd much rather have them just be left out entirely. And look, though I've certainly criticized the writers of the sequel trilogy before, including Abrams, this writing is a whole different level of bad. Because if Order 67 wasn't bad enough, supposedly when Rey and Kylo Ren are fighting for the first time, the first of many, they suddenly both feel a presence and they stop fighting and decide to go deal with it together, just like that. Which is completely nonsensical. It would, again, be terrible writing on a whole other level. I could maybe see it where one goes to confront the other to convince them to stop Palpatine together, and for some reason, at the end, they do agree to work together. But just the two during the middle of a random fight saying, hey, do you feel that? And the other says yes, and they agree to stop fighting and join up to deal with it. Again, that's writing so bad that it's hard to believe it didn't come from a 6-year-old. It's hard to believe anyone who wrote this or read it after thought it was good and that the movie was then put into production. It's hard to believe it's not intentionally bad. Then this rumor says that the Millennium Falcon was destroyed during the space battle, while Lando, Chewie, R2, and C-3PO were all on board, and they were all confirmed to be dead. And this is where things get really sketchy with this leak, in my opinion. Because not only is there no context given as to why and or how it was exactly destroyed, but I find it nearly impossible to believe, no matter what the context, that all 4 of these characters would be killed in one fell swoop. That's something that really would get me to walk out of the theater, and I can't believe the movie would have the audacity to do this. Not to mention, just why would you do this? How would it possibly serve the story to kill all those characters at once? Is it some type of great and noble sacrifice that will be remembered throughout the ages in all corners of the galaxy? Or at least a couple decades, kind of like how some seem to forget about Luke after a couple decades. But seriously, it would be damn near impossible to pull off a scene where you killed that many legacy characters all at once. And if it's just some random TIE fighter taking them out, it would go down as being one of the worst, most laughably bad scenes in film history. And those making this movie really have to know that. Not to mention, I just can't see them killing all 4 of them. Not when 3 of the 4, all of them save Lando and maybe 3PO, could easily show up again being played by other actors, and Chewie already is played by another actor, and Kenny Baker, of course, passed away years ago. Anyway, they could all be played again down the road by other actors post The Rise of Skywalker. And mind you here, I am assuming two things. That yes, again, they have some level of competency and would realize the near impossible task of killing off that many legacy characters all at once, especially if it's not in a truly grandiose style. And that, contrary to what some believe, they're not just going to kill off the old characters for the heck of it. Then there's also the fact that one of the ideas of Star Wars was that the story was being seen through the eyes of these two droids. So killing both of them off in the end would really begin to destroy that idea, that one of them didn't carry on the story they had seen. I could see one of them dying, yes, but no way both of them. Again, assuming some level of competency, which maybe I do assume too much. Anyway, if this is all true, and that is a big if, even the one reporting these rumors stresses it's a big if, what seems the most likely thing to me is that whoever relayed this information wanted to paint this movie or this test screening in the worst possible way imaginable, and hence left out details or exaggerated things or intentionally took things out of context to make it sound even worse than maybe it really was. Because again, this writing is a whole different level of bad. It's far below even amateur quality. It makes terrible fan fiction look like Shakespeare. And don't get me wrong, yes, there is of course every chance that it may have actually been this bad, again, assuming it's all true. I'm just saying this reads so bad that it's hard to believe anyone wrote this and then others read it and approved it and they filmed it, and it was only when they got to some test screenings that they realized it was awful. Not saying that's never happened before, or that it doesn't happen somewhat often actually, or that other things don't derail movies behind the scenes or cause disasters, but again, there are things that are so bad in here that I really struggle to believe them. And then when we hear from those actually working on the movie, they're making it sound like everything is more or less a-okay and there's nothing major to worry about, which of course they would say even if there were major problems to worry about. And though a lot of people are quoting something Abrams said recently that so much is still being worked on, it's literally a practical race to get it finished, he actually said quite a bit more than that, and the full quote tells a slightly different story and seems to contradict all these rumors of problems behind the scenes, though I again stress he likely wouldn't admit to them anyway, even if they do exist. Anyway, what Abrams said was, "We always knew we were going to have 3 fewer months to post-production this film. So much is still being worked on, it's literally a practical race to get it finished. We had more reshoots on episode 7 than this one. We had more story adjustments on 7 than this one. We didn't know if these characters would work, if the actors would be able to carry a Star Wars movie. There were a lot of things we didn't know. On this one, we knew who and what worked, and everyone is doing the best work I have ever seen anyone do. But the ambition of this movie is far greater than The Force Awakens. What we set out to do was far more challenging. Everything is exponentially larger on this." Okay, so if we believe everything J.J. Abrams says here, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt for the moment, he's actually saying there were less reshoots and adjustments on 9 than there were on 7, which means all this talk about extensive reshoots for 9, multiple cuts of the movie, and trying to decide on an ending is likely untrue. He also makes it sound like all along, they knew they'd have less time in post-production. So when he says they're racing to finish, this was apparently something they knew was coming. Not that the movie is such a disaster that they're trying to piece something acceptable together with what they have to work with. And so again, trying to be fair here, if there were reshoots for this movie, which there almost certainly was, studios these days plan for them and even include them in the budget, and Abrams did say they happened, but that they were less than what happened on episode 7. Anyway, I highly doubt they reshot something like 75% of the movie, which some have claimed, or that they were really that extensive. And considering principal photography lasted for roughly 6 months on The Rise of Skywalker, I don't know how they reshot 3/4 of the film in a fraction of that time. Not to mention, this disastrous screening was, I believe, supposed to have taken place a few months back, and they are what prompted the extensive reshoots and for the movie to essentially be remade. So again, it just doesn't seem like they would have had time to do all this. Also, we can't overlook the fact that a lot of fans are angry right now and want to see this movie fail. And though I'm certainly not saying they don't have the right to be upset and or disappointed, after all, I consider myself among the ranks of those let down by the sequel trilogy thus far. But we do again have to take into consideration that whoever may be leaking all these rumors on Reddit or to YouTubers or wherever else it might be, they want this movie to fail and for people to either skip it or to find problems with it and to ultimately not like it. In other words, we do not know the motivation of the source, but likely there's someone who wants to see big, sweeping changes take place at Lucasfilm. And on the flip side, we do know the motivation of Disney, Lucasfilm, J.J. Abrams, and others associated with this movie. They want it to be a huge financial success, which means if there are massive problems behind the scenes, they certainly wouldn't be telling us right now. They'd be saying exactly what they are saying, that things are going smoother this time around in comparison to Episode 7, and that The Rise of Skywalker is a great, satisfying conclusion to the Skywalker saga that fans are going to love, which again is exactly what they're saying. And so, in conclusion, what do I really think about all this? Well, pretty much the only thing we can do, unfortunately, is wait and see what the movie actually turns out to be. You've got one side telling us it's going to be a great masterpiece, and the other saying it's going to be an absolute dumpster fire. And most likely, it's going to be somewhere in between those two extremes. And as I've said many times before, I'm going to go into this movie with an open mind, or as open as I can possibly have it, and I'll tell you exactly what I thought of it afterwards, good or bad. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all these leaks and rumors and test screenings that people are apparently walking out of. Do you believe it or not? Either way, let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.